Welcome to Inside Albania with me, Alice Taylor. This week I'm taking a look at two very different topics. The first is that of human trafficking. While we know a lot about trafficking outside of the country, what do we really know about trafficking inside Albania? The answer is not much. Furthermore, there's a growing number of foreign nationals being trafficked inside the country. I'm joined by the CEO of Mary Ward Loreto, Redi Chirazi, to find out more. Second topic is, as cryptocurrency and particularly its use in crime has made headlines in Albania and Kosovo in the last week, I wanted to find out more about what it really is, what it's used for, and whether it is just a tool for criminals to conceal their wealth. I'm joined by an expert in cryptocurrency with years of experience in the legal sector, all the way from Malta, otherwise known as the blockchain island, Joseph Zamit. Haide me mua. So, sadly, Albania has long been a source country for human trafficking, and Albanian criminals have been involved in labour and sex trafficking since the early 90s. This is when the phenomenon really kicked off, when democracy came. I've read some horrific stories over the years about what happened during those times, but this is a situation that continues to prevail. I've had people say to me, it doesn't happen. They don't traffic young girls out of Albania anymore. They very much do, unfortunately. But recently, I've been made aware of maybe not a new phenomenon, but one that's probably evolving quicker than it should be. And that is the trafficking of foreign nationals inside Albania. So this is people of various nationalities that come to Albania for work and end up being trafficked, exploited in their work. And I don't mean just for sex. I mean, in terms of their time and the conditions they're working in. This abuse can take various forms: labour, exploitation, not being given contracts, not receiving fair or full pay or pay at all in some cases, unfair and dangerous working conditions, subjecting them to physical and psychological violence, and even being sold or passed on to other traffickers. I actually, on the show last week, I interviewed an activist in Malta, and she was telling me about Albanians who are going to Malta to work there and the conditions that they are subjected to there. They end up working in construction sites, for example, with no health and safety regulations. They're not on the books. And there were two that died last year. Two guys, Albanian guys, died on an illegal construction site, because the checks and balances, the controls are just not there. So I've invited you here today, Redi from Mary Ward Loreto, an organisation that's very close to my heart. And I wanted to find out a bit more about this phenomenon. So firstly, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Alice.
Now, I was made aware of this evolving situation, so to speak, through the work I do with you, with Mary Ward Loreto. And I wanted to start at the beginning. So how are these people, these foreign nationalities, how are they ending up in Albania out of every country, they could go to?
Yeah. So before I get to that, Alice, I just want to say a few words about the organization, the
Yes.
foundation. So Mary Ward Loreto Foundation is a nonprofit that was funded about 12 years ago, over 12 years ago, actually. And throughout this time, we've actually been in the front lines of working against human trafficking, or in the fight against human trafficking, if you will. Our mission focuses primarily on protecting victims of human trafficking, empowering survivors to live fulfilling lives, as well as supporting communities and society to become resilient and to prevent exploitation in the future. I know it sounds like a mouthful, but it really is about providing freedom, dignity, and justice for all those victims of human trafficking. And because we've been in the cusps of all these evolvements around human trafficking and the transition from Albanians being trafficked in the past to now us seeing the foreign nationals being trafficked in Albania, and unfortunately a lot of Albanians being the traffickers and the abusers and the exploiters, we have a very broad picture of the phenomenon. I might say it is a little bit sad to see that what's been done to Albanians for a very long time abroad is now being done to foreigners here in Albania.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. It was what happened sort of in the early 90s and over those subsequent years was so horrific, and then to see a similar pattern being repeated with foreign nationals. And I want to just give some context to our audience as well. We talk about prevention. You think, well, how can you prevent human trafficking? But it's about making people aware. So, like, I heard of instances where young women were meeting a guy asks them out, and he promises them the world, and I love you, and we're going to get married and have babies, and come and live in Italy with me or whatever. And she falls in love with him and then ends up going with him and being sold into prostitution. So it's making women aware of the traps that they can fall into, but also developing skills, developing education, developing a future in their community, so they're not having to maybe look for a job somewhere that might end up being a bit dodgy, and that they're empowered personally. This is what you mean by prevention, so to speak.
Exactly, but it's also about structures and processes. In order for us to enable a society that is resilient holistically, it's very important that institutions perform, and they're at the fullest of their capabilities and capacities to do that. So this is about establishing standard operating procedures, making sure that the frontliners are trained and they're aware, so that these individuals who are going through any form of exploitation actually have a door where they can knock at.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, civil society organizations cannot partake in this fight alone.
No,
they
right.
do need the support of the institutions, and ultimately, whether we like it or not, the buck stops there. So it's very, very important that in building sustainable resilience, we also turn our eyes towards government institutions, which, they are key partners, but I think more can be done.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of reintegrating the victims as well, I was really horrified to hear, that if a woman or a girl is trafficked outside of the country and, God forbid, sexually trafficked, she can face significant problems reintegrating with her family and the community when she returns. And this puts her at risk of poverty, of being re-trafficked, of falling into homelessness or something, and I was really horrified because, there's so much focus on the Albanian family unit. This is one of the strongest things in Albanian society, the family first. But yet these girls who become victim and are essentially sex trafficked or whatever, they might be rejected by their family when they come home. I found this really hard to get my head around.
It is true. Stigma is a powerful tool for perpetuating the cycle of violence and of fear of many of these victims, actually. But I must say that with regards to providing protection to Albanian victims of human trafficking, Albania has advanced quite a lot. It is this new phenomenon of foreigners being exploited in Albania that has caught us off guard, really. And the way I see it right now is that the mentality is we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and we haven't realized that we're actually right there. We're at the precipice, and we are about to cross that bridge.
So which nationalities are you seeing the most in Albania that are being affected? And also, how are they coming here? I mean, are they being brought here in a clandestine way? Are they coming here on holiday? Are they coming in a legal pathway? And then, how is it happening?
I'll start with your second question. The ways of being trafficked are actually, it starts off with a very legal process. So many of them come here with with appropriate working contracts. They have legal documents, they have a visa, a work permit. And this is done through intermediary actors, which are employment agencies. They will typically, propose them a particular job, a certain salary. They agree to come here. And then the whole exploitation situation, although it does begin from the recruitment itself, really starts to happen in Albania, which shows that we are lacking the control mechanisms to prevent this from happening. So sometimes we've also seen cases where they've come to Albania with a tourist visa, and while they're staying here, they get a job somewhere, and in the process start to get the permit. The staying permit in the country. So this is how it really starts. Some of the nationalities that are currently most at risk are the ones where cheaper labor is coming from, namely the Philippines, Indonesia, Bangladesh. Recently, we're seeing China, and a very large growth in the number of African nationals coming to Albania, and that's for two reasons. One, they see Albania as a safe place to work, but it's also much cheaper as compared to other countries where they can go
Germany
work.
or
Exactly. So recruitment agencies are actually exploiting this from fraudulent recruitment to legitimate recruitment. But then, as I said, the real exploitation begins once they arrive here.
And of course, these individuals that have been referred to you or have just shown up, this is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
It is the tip of the iceberg.
We have no real way of knowing how many other people have been trafficked and are currently in this country, whether it's working illegally in a massage parlor or, you know, just without a contract, or being sex trafficked or abused in some other way. You know, we don't know, do we? That's really concerning as well.
You say the tip of the iceberg. I would say we've just scratched the surface, and unfortunately, the numbers are staggering. You know,
So these recruitment agencies, they are working without licenses. I don't think this sector is regulated as such, is it?
And now, as I said, especially when it comes to labor exploitation, the process is legal in its appearance. So what happens is an individual is recruited through an agency, they're promised a certain pay, they sign a contract. Now, there are a lot of issues with the contract. We've analyzed some of the contracts. And I can tell you that not only does it not meet Albanian labor law requirements, but it doesn't meet the basic international human rights law requirements.
It's just someone's just made
Such
it
as,
look.
for example, you know, you don't have any off days. You have to stay in this particular location, you know, at all times. The employer has the right to seize your documentation, your personal documents, your identification documents, your passport, your ID. And this puts them in a very vulnerable position because, one, they cannot even send money back to their homes. So we've had a case most recently, actually, of a woman who wasn't able to send money home because she has no identification means to go to the bank and actually send the money home. Then we have situations of when a business has less work, especially because we have to understand that most of them work in the service industry in Albania, and particularly in the high peak tourism months, and when the influx of tourists kind of dies down or goes down, we see that a lot of the employers, they don't want to have them around. So without any regard for respecting the contract, they will sometimes sell them off to another person. So they'll find a resort somewhere else that is operating, year round, and they'll tell them that, you know, they need to go work somewhere else. Now this move of individuals from one place to another, that in itself puts the workers in a very vulnerable position. They don't know where they're at. They don't have any points of contact. They don't have any information on, you know, who they can talk to. There's very little information in our state institution websites on, you know, who they can ask for help or where they can go for help, and that's how oftentimes then, you know, they end up stumbling upon organizations like Mary Ward Loreto.
And these people have probably
Unlawful detention.
They've probably paid a sum of money to be brought to Albania to have a visa, a job. You know, these recruitment agencies, how the scam was working in Malta, people were paying between 6,000 and 11,000 euros for a house that never existed. It was like a bed in a dormitory, the contract of work and the visa. You know, is that similar? People are paying upfront to come here to these agencies?
In some cases, yes.
Yeah.
In other cases, the agency will take a portion of the salary that the employee is supposed to get back. But in cases, especially from Africa, what we've seen is that similar amount of payment. So 5,000 to 6,000 euros being paid upfront. The recruitment agency, which is sometimes just a front, in reality, there is no recruitment agency, will set up the whole documentation, the whole paperwork. In the case of Adam, I'm going to call him Adam, a man from Cameroon, he was invited to come to Albania to work as the manager of a hotel, a well-known hotel here in Tirana, actually. When he arrived, he had paid 6,000 euros up front. They bought him a ticket and they got him the visa. Things which, overall didn't maybe cost more than 500 euros for the agency, the supposed agency to provide. When Adam arrived here in Tirana, nobody was at the airport to welcome him as he was promised. And after waiting there for a very long time, he didn't have any contact. So some person comes to the airport and tells him, look, I'll give you shelter for the night. So he had to go to a local house in Albania, who is actually run, maybe that's not the right word, but who's owned, you could say, by another foreign national in Albania. The person provided him with a bed at the corner of a room. He had to stay there with many other people. And these were people that were left in the same situation. So obviously there is it's coordinated. It is coordinated. It is a ring, a trafficking network, right? So he had to pay to stay for the night, being scared for his life and what was going to happen to him. He described it as holding tight to his documentation and not sleeping the entire night. The next morning he shows up at the church, and it was thanks to many of our church partners that they flagged this case to us. We started to work with the individual. Our psychologists, social workers identified that he had gone through a lot of trauma. One, because of the war back home. He had left his family there in the hopes that he would provide money to send back and get them out of that situation, but also the whole ordeal. Him coming here and knowing at that point that he was being trafficked. We contacted the hotel, just to check. They had no idea anything was happening. No idea, so it was not really the fault of the hotel. I mean, these are people it's truly a network. People who forged every single documentation, from stamps, from signatures, from the positions, letterheads, everything, making it seem very, very realistic. So that 6,000 euros it just went away. And this is a case of a fake, a fraudulent employment, but it ends up in individuals being trafficked. Now, what would have happened typically after if he had stayed at that place for a longer time, is they would have proposed him a job position somewhere where he would be illegal because he would have no paperwork, no documentation. And especially for labor workers, the staying permit in Albania is tied to where you work, to your current employer, right? So if you're not working with your current employer, the one that provided you the permit to come and live in Albania, then you're automatically legal, so you could be deported at any time. And this is exactly the level of desperation that trafficking networks want to see in their victims, because they know that they have them at that point. It gives them
leverage, power.
It gives them a lot of leverage and power, and they can just be abused. And we've seen cases beforehand of individuals that ended having to sleep in factories overnight, where the employer, and this is happening here in Albania. It's unbelievable when I recall some of these stories. Individuals get locked at the factory where they're working the next morning. It's more like it's a mixer.
They lock them in the factory overnight.
Yeah, so they'll work in the factory during the day. At night they cannot leave, so they're sleeping in a quarter there.
These are Albanian-owned factories.
These are Albanian.
So Bessa's just gone out the window, really.
I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that unfortunately it is.
It's really shocking to hear this. That they lock these people in.
Yeah, and it's happened in several times. So unlawful detention, it's also been the case. But this is more like, I don't want them to leave, because in a sense, we had a case in Shkodra actually about 2 months ago. And essentially 2 people were being locked inside the house until eventually the neighborhoods figured there was something wrong, and they reported it, and fortunately the police intervened. But there are cases where they get locked in the factory. The next day, they open up shop again and they start working. There's many other cases.
Are the authorities not aware of what's going on? Like, surely you guys must speak to them and say, hey, this is happening. This person, here's a phone number. Here's what this person's, what's their reaction?
So as I said, this whole phenomena is actually catching the government off guard, and it's catching us as a society off guard because, with the increase in the number of Albanians that are leaving Albania to go and work abroad, we're seeing a large number of foreigners coming in. And we see this in the news all the time. If you talk to any business owners, especially in the service industry, in the tourism service industry, they will tell you that we need foreign workers. And as we speak, they're signing contract. In Indonesia, our deputy minister of labor about a year ago signed a contract with Indonesia for 44,000 foreign workers to come work in Albania. Now that's eventually going to start filling up, right?
Yes.
But unlike in Germany, for example, or a developed Western European country that have gone through this process of having this big influx of foreign workers, and they have structures and processes in place, Albania doesn't, because this has never been a concern for us, and we've never really had an issue with lacking labor in the country. But that's showing up. It's blowing up more and more. And with it comes exploitation, especially if you don't have barriers in place to prevent it from happening and to protect these victims. And what I mean protect is really protect them, because at the end of the day, we as a country have, are ascribed to many of the international human rights convention, the labor law conventions, and we do have a duty to uphold our end of the bargain, and to ensure that they leave in safety. There's all forms of exploitation. Unlawful detention is another one.
Yes.
And this typically happens in cases where an employee has arrived in Albania through a legal contract. They're working with an employer for a certain period of time, but then the employer is unhappy with the performance, or maybe their business is going down, so they can't hire new people. Once their staying permit is past its due date, which is, I must say, a very short time frame, only 3 months, and 3 months really fly by very quickly if you're a foreign worker in another country. Then they will not renew the contract, and that gives them a lot of leverage to, one, lower their pay, keep them under the threat of violence and deportation. And when the conflicts often aggravate, we've seen cases of the employers locking them up, for example, in a particular in a room somewhere, calling the police, and then the police themselves, I would say, being complicit in the trafficking, will take these individuals without a court order or prosecution order and deport them from the country because their staying permit has ended. Now, there's a lot of issues throughout this entire cycle, because we can see, one, the police fails to identify the issue of unlawful detentions, which is a criminal act in Albania and everywhere else in the world. So instead of them actually stopping and saying, well, wait, what a second.
Why are they locked
actually
here?
Locked up somebody in your house? They actually say, well, that's fine,
And
I
why
know
are they in
you're a
your
good
house
guy.
anyway?
Now, corruption does play a role in it. We've seen many cases of, of corruption, nepotism, and ties, connections between business owners and the police, because they work it out with one another, right? I need you to do this favor for me, kind of thing. And again, this goes to show that the institutions are not prepared. Police, the institutions that do the protection are not well trained to identify where the crime, the perpetration, and to act accordingly. And unfortunately, this is making our institutions complicit with human trafficking. Long-term effect of this is that I think we will eventually develop a negative image of the country. So although right now we're seeing a lot of foreign workers coming because there is the need, when the word spreads out that Albania is a country where you are not treated fairly and lawfully, then eventually those numbers will start to die down, and we will go back to the issue of us needing to have more employers, more employees to work.
Now, for those watching, which industries are the sort of industries that we should be looking at, because I would want viewers to sort of be a bit aware as well, if they're using certain kinds of businesses, who's working there, are there any warning signs to look out for? And if they believe that someone is being trafficked or is being exploited in some way, what can they do? So what warning signs can they look out for? Where should they be looking? And what can they do if they think they see somebody in need?
Now, I would say a lot of Albanians have seen them. They're around us, especially if you live in Tirana. You see a lot of foreign workers from Asian countries in particular. They work in the domestic service industry primarily, and I must say that it is often very difficult for an average citizen to detect these signs. However, if they know about situations where individuals are being kept in facilities without their will, they're not being allowed to go outside of the facility. They don't have the right to enjoy 1 or 2 days off a week. They have work contracts which stipulate absurd requirements such
hand over your passport,
such as that, or you only have 1 day of leave per month, right? One off day per month. There are a lot of very good, legitimate businesses. 90% of them are legitimately, good businesses run ethically.
My mum,
but it's always the bad apple.
My
right?
mum has a Filipino helper. She comes twice a week, and I can confirm she doesn't lock her in the house. Everything is done above board. She's like a friend of the family.
Great,
This is how it should be. There are lots of people who do treat their other nationals, foreign workers well. Yeah. But we need to be aware. We need to have our eyes open for those who are not.
Exactly. It's always that bad apples, right? It's 1 in 10, and 1 in 20 that will actually damage the reputation of everyone else and hurt the interests of everyone else, which is why I think, our business unions need to get ahead of this, need to start a discourse and ask that the government imposes regulations, imposes checks, standard operating procedures, improves its structures within government so that they can do on-the-ground checks. They can do online checks. They can establish new regulations and control mechanisms to prevent exploitation on the one hand, but also to allow Albanian businesses to flourish in an ethical way.
It's also, this situation needs to be nipped in the bud because it's taking resources away from other people who need it as well. Not that one is more important than the other, but the government should also be doing more to prevent this. So the limited resources that, for example, Mary Ward Loretto has can be used elsewhere as well. You shouldn't be doing the job of the police, of the social services, etc.
That's true. That's why we find ourselves very thinly spread.
Yes.
It's very, very difficult to turn down somebody who's literally knocking at your door.
Reddy, thank you very much, and for the work you're doing, not just for Albanian people, but the foreigners who are finding themselves in a less than welcoming situation here. Thank you very much.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, Alice. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Joseph, thank you for joining me all the way from Malta. Welcome to Inside Albania.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Now, let's start at the beginning. You and I know very well what cryptocurrency is, but there is quite a lot of people in Albania that don't really understand what is a crypto coin, how they can use it. And whether it's something that can be used day to day, can I go shopping with crypto, for example? Can I buy a plane ticket? I think for many, it's sort of this existential concept that exists only in international media and sort of crime reports. Can you break it down sort of quite simply? What is a crypto coin? How can it be used? And is it something we're probably going to be seeing more of in the future?
Yes. I think the biggest problem with cryptocurrency is the lack of education and the knowledge surrounding it. Firstly, I would like to break it down that cryptocurrencies is mainly split into different levels of coins. So there is coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum, Bitcoin being the first and original coin, which obviously have have intrinsic value and everyday use. Then you can say that there are stable coins, which are, as their name says, stable because they are pegged or with euro or with the US dollar. And then there is maybe the other side, the meme coins, the collectibles, and the NFTs, which are on a totally different level. They're more, you can say, they are more of a collectible or related to celebrities or other events happening around the world, which are simply a collectible, and their value goes up and down depending on the popularity or demand of the coin. Whereas when you have coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and Solana have an intrinsic value and daily use, which you can use on a daily basis to purchase things and in everyday life. In today's world, we have hybrid banks, hybrid exchanges, which offer the off-ramping or the transaction being done between the cryptocurrency and fiat by means generally of a virtual card or a physical card, where literally you can go up to a coffee shop and order your coffee and choose the currency, the cryptocurrency of your choice, and pay directly with it. Clothes, fashion, cars, houses, you can all do this on a daily basis. When it comes to the future, I think we've already surpassed a situation where crypto is being adopted very rapidly and being used in many areas in around the world, and we're seeing a higher adoption month on month and year on year.
It's true.
I believe.
I've been in Europe where I've seen the option at the checkout to pay in cryptocurrency, and this is quite normal, I think, for a lot of people, especially in the UK, the US, and some other countries in Europe. They're very familiar with this concept. But here, if someone asked me to pay in cryptocurrency, I'd be like, are you going to rip me off? Like, what do you mean,
And funnily enough, you can see even adoption in regions around the world where access to banking, normal traditional banking, is not so accessible, and cryptocurrencies and crypto and blockchain solutions are taking over. So the reach of access to your finances and the mobility of your finance is at reach. All you need to have is a mobile phone with an internet connection.
And this is a very good point. There are millions of people around the world who don't have access to banks. It may be that they don't have a job or an address, a permanent address, or they have bad credit history, or, there's various different reasons why they might not be able to get a bank account. And that, in this day and age, excludes them from a lot of different kinds of transactions. So being able to pay with cryptocurrency, which doesn't require a formal bank account with a formal banking institution, it does give them that sort of level of accessibility. Now, I wanted to ask you, Donald Trump and Melania Trump have both launched their own crypto coin, from what I understand. Can anyone do this? Could I launch like an Alice coin if I wanted to? Not that anyone would buy it, but can anybody do this? And why would anyone want to? And does this fall into the categories of sort of like meme coins that you mentioned before? Or does like a Trump coin have a value?
Yes, and I again, that is because of sometimes it's misconceptions or lack of education or people knowledge. So the Melania coin and Trump coin fall into the meme coins category, which could be in a form of an NFT collection. It could be in a form of a coin. There are several of them, but they don't have an intrinsic value per se, but just it's a coin that the value rises based on the popularity. You can compare it as to I am into collecting stamps or old coins, and the value of that coin is determined by the demand of the collectors. Same here with NFTs and meme coins. Anybody can create his own version, but the value is pegged the celebrity or to the meme or to the subject you're pegging the coin, and that goes up and down depending on the popularity and the demand from the community.
So if I launch my own coin, it's probably not going to be worth very much, but if the Prime Minister launched his own coin, it would probably be worth more than mine, simply because he's more well known than me. That's sort of how it works. But
yes, but in the crypto world, you would be surprised with everything. There are meme coins for cats and dogs and animals, and they've risen in popularity. But
like
in core.
But like the chance of me being able to do my grocery shopping with like my dog's called Pepper, with a Pepper coin would be very slim, whereas with Bitcoin it's probably going to be more likely.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's because the meme coins and NFT are not let's say a currency per se, although they hold value, whereas the main cryptocurrencies like obviously Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and all the rest, they are mainly coins which are
for transactions,
have nodes that yeah, exactly. We know that obviously built on a ledger, on a blockchain ledger, can verify the transactions being done, whereas a meme coin can be only held, sold, or traded.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like a football card or like a baseball card. You know, it has a value depending on how old it is, how popular they are. You can trade it, but you can't buy your lunch with it. That's the thing. Now, this week, and I don't expect you to be an expert on our local politics, but there was a politician in Kosovo who declared he had more than 330,000 euros in Bitcoin. And just this week, there was a gang busted who they were involved in organised crime and drug trafficking, and they were found to have $10 million worth of Bitcoin, like the equivalent. And that was seized by the authorities here. Does cryptocurrency make crime easier? Is it something just for the benefit of the criminals? Now, my view on this is crime is committed every day with fiat currency, you know? Cryptocurrency, it's not that it benefits them, it just can be used in the same way, but it doesn't mean that it's just something for the use of criminals. What's your view?
I agree, I totally agree. And this is like anything in life. Let's take, for example, the knife. Then you can use the knife to cut your bread, spread your butter, but you can use it to harm people. So the knife per se is not a bad thing or a bad tool, but how humans interact with it and their intentions to use it make it bad. Moving on to crypto, if you look at reports. Reports on, for example, like chain analysis, there was a report exclusively based on issues that you're saying, and illegal activity, which is directly related to crypto, is less than 1%. So while yes, it's true that you will find cases or scenarios where crypto is being used for illicit or illegal use, it's still very low compared to the use of normal currency.
But might people argue, you know, well, why allow it? Why increase that risk, even if it's a small risk? Why bring something else to the table that by its very nature, because it's decentralized, is impossible to sort of control in a way? Why not just make it illegal and take a weapon away from criminals, so to speak?
Because I think the benefits cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and decentralization overcome or are much higher and bigger than how it can be used illegally or for malicious use. Like, for example, we said earlier, there is reports that currently in the world there are over 1.6 billion people in the world who do not have access to traditional finance or cannot have access to finance. So why remove that solution that can help that amount of people? Why remove a solution that gives you the benefits to have a total control of your finances, having the total custodial control over your finances, reducing the fees of making transactions
quicker
to
as well.
Nearly zero instant transactions. Why remove all these benefits for just a simple 1% that's being reported? I think the benefits overcome.
Of course. Okay. So the solution is regulation. Then, in a way, let's try and regulate it in a way, but without sort of infringing on this concept of decentralization. So, in 2020, the Albanian government announced legislation for cryptocurrency, and that those wanting to work with it and would have to get licenses. There haven't been any licenses issued. Malta was, I believe, one of the first, if not the first, to work. To legislate in favour of cryptocurrency. I actually worked briefly on part of the law when I was back in my law firm days. Has Malta done the right thing in its approach to regulation? Has it worked? Does regulation make an impact, or should it be a hands-off approach?
I believe that regulation is necessary. It's a good thing. Let's take in case in point in Malta. Malta, as you said, was the first country in the world to put 3 legislations for DLT, for VFA, for the Financial Virtual Assets Framework, and that was in 2018. It was the first iteration, the first start. Since the technology is evolving, obviously the regulation needs to continue and evolving. As of this year, from 2025, we're seeing the adoption and the release of the MiCA regulation throughout the European Union. That is, for me, the second iteration of how regulation should be. You can argue in favor and against that. In some cases, maybe some regulations are too controlling and maybe not giving room for growth. But I think it's a start, and more iterations should kept on going. And regulations are there to be observed, yes. But then you obviously also need enforcement.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like in Albania, we have this framework, but people aren't using it. It's not being enforced. I'm pretty sure if I went to my local police station and started talking to them about Bitcoin and like cold wallets and things, they'd just think I was absolutely crazy. In Malta, has the regulation of cryptocurrency been effective in clamping down on illegal usage and financial crime using crypto? Do we know?
So, in Malta, that is split. So, the Malta Financial Services Authority regulates the law and is a regulator. Whereas when it comes to financial crime, Malta has the Financial Intelligence Analysis Unit, which oversees anti-money laundering activities, countering of the financing of terrorism, and all the rest. So the enforcement falls within the Financial Intelligence Unit, or in short, as we call it, the FIAU. They work closely, of course, with foreign bodies, and European bodies, and if I recall correctly, cases that were picked up are being tried and done. So yes, regulation and enforcement needs to work together, and obviously continue building on that. This is the same for fiat currencies. Obviously, anti-money laundering and financial crimes with fiat currency exist as well, and they've been since all times. And obviously, it's the same. The same scenario.
As far as I'm concerned, in the Albanian context anyway, I think, there's no escaping it. We might be a bit behind in terms of adoption and awareness, but you can't stop it. It's going to happen. People are going to start using it. And I just think the government needs to get on top of that and get ahead of the curve as well. They need to be a step ahead of the public when it comes to regulation and tackling it when it's being used for crime. Thank you so much for your time and for explaining that in an easier way for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That's all for this week. Don't forget you can watch Inside Albania on our YouTube channel, Inside Albania, across all major podcasting platforms, and on our TV channel, Euronews Albania. Until next week, Mirapavshim.